Hello again and welcome back to our course on Access 2013 Advanced. In the previous section we finished by looking at putting some basic error handling into one or two of the VBA procedures we had attached to a switchboard, and I've got two or three other things to point out to you. Now, one of the things to point out to you is that there isn't a right way and a wrong way of writing VBA code. Very much of it is down to individual preference and style. In fact, if you asked two different experienced VBA programmers how to structure a sub like this one with the error handling that we put in at the end of the last section, they'd come up with at least two different ways of doing it, and it's very unlikely that they would agree. So for example, one of them might say, well, I've no idea why you've put go to click exit there. Why don't you just put in a line that says exit sub, which will not bother to go down to that label and just exit the sub. Then you wouldn't even need that label. Some people prefer to structure it one way, some people prefer to structure it another way. But whichever way you're doing it, it's very important to go through it methodically yourself, if you like, in theory, stepping your way through each of the VBA subs and functions that you write to make sure that it makes sense to you, and then as far as it's possible to test each of the possible cases that might occur when you're running a piece of VBA code. For example, using the approach we took towards the end of the last section, where we temporarily renamed a form to make it appear to not exist and just check what happened in the case of an error. Now, we also demonstrated as part of that this message box error dollar here, making sure you can see what sort of description we've got of the error. What I'm going to do now is do the same for the students button and students form, but without putting the error handling in. So first of all, let me click on the students button. The student list form opens absolutely fine. Let me just close it again. Now I'm going to rename the student list form. Click on the students button again, and this time I get a Microsoft Visual Basic runtime error. You'll notice that the text of this error is pretty much the text of the error that we got before, but there are a couple of very significant differences. One of them is that it gives this message runtime error, and you get a different set of buttons here, one of which says debug. Now, what you do not want when you have an application that's being run by other people is to have a message like this coming up inviting them to try to debug your programs. That's one of the reasons why we put in error handling of the type we did in the previous section. But when you're testing, what this will do for you, if you click on debug here for example, it takes you exactly to the command that has failed. It enables you to identify the point within your VBA code where this has failed. Now, once you've done that, there are all sorts of tools you can use within VBA to just check what the status of things is. You can use that immediate window at the bottom that I mentioned much earlier on. You maybe need to check the value of something. Maybe you need to have a look at what forms are available. Just try and figure out what's gone wrong and use some of those available tools. But the important thing is that this is a message that you get, if you like, as a default message with those options to go into the debugger and so on. If you then discover what the problem is and you correct the problem, when you finish working on it, click on close on the VBA editor. Watch what happens. Whatever step you've taken, it normally says this command will stop the debugger. You click on OK. Now in this case, of course, it's not a programming error, it's the fact that we've hidden that form. So if I rename it back to its correct name, of course the students button will work again. But it's important to realize that that's what happens by default. If you don't put in error handling, then you're going to drop into the debugger. Now, to be fair, there are various ways that you can hide that VBA code from people, and we'll be looking at one of those right towards the end of the course. But you certainly don't want people being directed into your VBA code, and it's really a sign that you haven't given enough thought to what might happen in reality when somebody is using your Access application. Now the next thing I want to look at is something else about this main switchboard in the college student database. At the moment you can close that form. Generally speaking, you wouldn't close a switchboard, but there's a close button as part of the form up there. You can actually remove a close button like this one, which would stop somebody closing the form in that way. But sometimes also you want to replace the functionality that's standard with a form with your custom VBA behavior. So let's suppose that I'm going to give my switchboard a close button, but I'm going to make it a bespoke, a custom close button, one that's going to check that I want to close it before I do, because I may accidentally click on the close there and not mean to. So what I'm going to do first of all is to go into the design of the switchboard. I won't need the property sheet for a moment. One way of doing this would be to copy one of the existing buttons. So if I right click on the About button, do a copy, and then do a paste, and then let me take that button, which is a copy of the About button. I'll put it there for the moment, but I'm going to rename that particular button, and I'm going to give it obviously a different caption. So let's bring up the property sheet again. I can do that from the Tools group on the Design tab in the Form Design Tools. There's the property sheet. Let me just move the form across a bit. That button's still selected. That button is not going to be called Command 28. It's going to be called CMD Close, and event associated with it will come back to in a moment for its on-click event. Let me select that object. That's the label. I'm going to call it Command Close label. Just remember, as I said in the previous section, it's a good idea to give everything meaningful names. Now let me actually change the text that's in that button. So if I go on to Format, if I go down to Caption, instead of About, I want Close Form. Let's now select the button again, and then let's go in and give it an on-click event. Code Builder, click on OK, and there is the VBA sub waiting for me to put some content into it. Now you can probably work out by now that pretty much what I need to do is what I do in the Command Exit Click sub. But what I'm going to do, rather than copy, paste and make a couple of small changes, I'm going to type this code in because I need to demonstrate to you quite a few other very important aspects of coding in VBA, particularly in relation to these event related activities. So let's just say I was going to start typing the code here, very similar code to the code in the next sub. Watch what happens now as I press the left bracket key. I get all of the prompts, all of the IntelliSense prompts for what I need to put into this message box function call. Remember, this is not the message box command, this is the function call. This is the one that returns a value. So there's my prompt. Now as soon as I hit the comma after that first argument for this function, it presents me with the options for the next argument. Now the next argument basically gives me the available buttons, and in fact you can combine these. You can add two buttons together, but the button we want, very similar to the one we've got below, it's going to be the yes/no combination. So I'm going to go for yes/no again. And again, as soon as I press the comma, I'm asked for the third argument, which is the title. And then I can either do comma and enter the next argument. Whenever I've finished, just press the close bracket. Now when I put equals, it will prompt me for the options for equals, and given that it's a VB yes no, I'm either going to be saying if it's VB yes do something, if it's VB no something, but I'm running out of space, so I can type in my underscore now. Now unfortunately when you put in this continuation character, press the enter key, then you're going to lose those prompts. You could put the continuation character in later of course, but I know what I need to type here. It's VB yes. Then, so that's fine. Now what I'm going to do, well, do command, it'll be a do command something, press the dot, and IntelliSense tells me what possible commands I could execute now, one of which is close. So choose close. Now press a space and I'm offered the arguments for close. Now so far whenever we've done do command close, we've just left it at close and it's defaulted to the current form. But as you can see, there are arguments. Let's put in the arguments for this. We want to close a form, comma, which form? Well, we want the current form. What's the current form called? It's called FRM switchboard. Obviously you don't actually need to do this, but I'm just showing that you can, comma, and then we're asked, do we need a save prompt? If there was a possibility that we were, say, changing the design of this form, then we may want to say, do you want to save changes, no prompt, or yes. Let's just go for no because we're not going to be changing the design. Press the enter key, end if. Now, no matter how confident you are in what you've done, there's always a possibility that there is a mistake, and you probably realize there's a mistake here. It's always important to compile after you've made changes like this before you try to run something. The fact that it compiles certainly doesn't necessarily guarantee that it will run, and it certainly doesn't guarantee that it will do the right thing. But if it doesn't compile, then it won't even run. So let's try compiling it first. Now with this one it says variable not defined. It obviously indicates the variable. You probably realize that was the mistake. But you may look at this and think, well, why is that treated as a variable? Why are these two okay? Well, when you're filling in arguments, things like VB yes no and AC form and AC save no, these are all what are called declared constants in VBA, and VBA knows what these things are. When it's using IntelliSense to present you with options, all of those constants that you can use as arguments are actually known constant values to access. They all actually have numeric values, and it's not bothered by any of those. The only thing that bothers it here is something called FRM switchboard. Now if you want it not to use a variable value but to use the form whose name is FRM switchboard, you have to either put a variable like str form name in there and give it a value of literally FRM switchboard, or you need to put the literal value in here as an argument. Now let's try compiling that. By the way, I apologise for the fact that you lose the left-hand edge of all of these little pictures. I'm afraid it's a function of how this is recorded, but you haven't lost any of the words, so that should be fine. Let's try compiling that, and this time it compiles okay. And in fact, if we try running it, let's open the switchboard, press the close form button, answer no, press the close form button again, answer yes. That does the job. Let's now go back into the design of the switchboard form. The form selected, format. Let's now remove the close button. So it's got close button yes. Let's say close button no. Now let's open the switchboard again. And of course the close button over there that would normally be there is grayed out, but we can close the form using our new button. In the next short section we're going to look at getting help with events in Access 2013, and I'm going to set you quite a challenging exercise to do as well. So please join me for that.